Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Chapter 15, The Forbidden Forest. Things couldn't have been worse. Filch took them down to Professor Mcgonagall's study on the first floor, where they sat and waited without saying a word to each other. Hermione was trembling. Excuses, alibis, and the wild cover-up stories chased each other around Harry's brain, each more feeble than the last. He couldn't see how they were going to get out of the trouble this time. They were cornered. How could they have been so stupid as to forget the cloak? There was no reason on earth that Professor McGonagall would accept for their being out of bed and creeping around the school in the dead of night, let alone being up the tallest astronomy tower, which was out of bounds except for classes. Add Norbert and the invisibility cloak, and they might as well be packing their bags already. And Harry thought that things couldn't have been worse. He was wrong. When Professor McGonagall appeared, she was leading Neville. Harry, Neville burst out the moment he saw the other two. I was trying to find you to warn you. I heard Malfoy saying he was going to catch you. He said you had a drag. Harry shook his head violently to shut Neville up, but Professor McGonagall had seen. She looked more likely to breathe fire than Norbert as she towered over the three of them. I would never have believed it of any of you. Mr. Filch says you were up in the astronomy tower. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Explain yourselves. It was the first time Hermione had ever failed to answer a teacher's question. She was staring at her slippers as still as a statue. I think I have got a good idea of what's been going on, said Professor McGonagall. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. You fed Draco Malfoy some cock and bull story about a dragon trying to get him out of bed and into trouble. I have already caught you. I suppose you think it's funny that Longbottom Ear heard the story and believed it too. Harry caught Neville's eye and tried to tell him without words that this wasn't true, because Neville was looking stunned and hurt. Poor blundering Neville. Harry knew what it must have cost him to try and find them in the dark to warn them. I am disgusted, said Professor McGonagall. 4 students out of bed in one night. I have never heard of such a thing before. You, Miss Granger, I thought you had more senses. As for you, Mr. Potter, I thought Gryffindor meant more to you than this. All 3 of you will receive detentions. Yes, you too, Mr. Longbottom. Nothing gives you the right to walk around school at night, especially these days. It's very dangerous. And 50 points will be taken from Gryffindor. 50? Harry gasped. They wouldn't lose the lead. The lead he had won in the last Quidditch match. 50 points each, said Professor McGonagall, breathing heavily through her long pointed nose. Professor, please, you can't. Don't tell me what I can and can't do. Potter, now get back to bed, all of you. I have never been more ashamed of Gryffindor students. 150 points lost. That put Gryffindor in last place. In one night, they had ruined any chance Gryffindor had for the House Cup. Harry felt as though the bottom had dropped out of his stomach. How could they ever make up for this? Harry didn't sleep all night. He could hear Neville sobbing into his pillow for what seemed like hours. Harry couldn't think of anything to say to comfort him. He knew Neville, like himself, was dreading the dawn. What would happen when the rest of the Gryffindor found out what they had done? At first, Gryffindors passing the giant hourglasses that recorded the house points the next day thought there would be a mistake. How could they suddenly have 150 points fewer than yesterday? And then the story started to spread. Harry Potter, the famous Harry Potter, their hero of 2 Quidditch matches, had lost them all those points. Him and a couple of other stupid first years. From being one of the most popular and admired people at the school, Harry was suddenly the most hated. Even Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs turned on him because everyone had been longing to see Slytherin lose the House Cup. Everywhere Harry went, people pointed and didn't trouble to lower their voices as they insulted him. Slytherins, on the other hand, clapped as he walked past them, whistling and cheering. "Thanks, Potter, we owe you one." Only Ron stood by him. They will all forget this in a few weeks. Fred and George have lost loads of points in all the time they have been here, and people still like them. They have never lost 150 points in one go, though, have they? Said Harry miserably. Well, no, Ron admitted. It was a bit late to repair the damage, but Harry swore to himself not to meddle in things that weren't his business from now on. He had it with sneaking around and spying. He felt so ashamed of himself that he went to Wood and offered to resign from the Quidditch team. Resign? Wood thundered. What good will that do? How are we going to get any points back if we can't win at Quidditch? But even Quidditch had lost its fun. The rest of the team wouldn't speak to Harry during practice, and if they had to speak about him, they called him the Seeker. Hermione and Neville were suffering too. They didn't have as bad as time as Harry because they weren't as well known, but nobody would speak to them either. Hermione had stopped drawing attention to herself in class, keeping her head down and working in silence. Harry was almost glad that the exams weren't far away. All the studying he had to do kept his mind off his misery. He, Ron, and Hermione kept to themselves, working late into the night, trying to remember the ingredients in complicated potions, learn charms and spells by heart, memorize the dates of magical discoveries and goblin rebellions. Then, about a week before the exams were due to start, Harry's new resolution not to interfere in anything that didn't concern him was put to an unexpected test. Walking back from the library on his own one afternoon, he heard somebody whimpering from a classroom up ahead. As he drew closer, he heard Quirrell's voice. "No, no, not again, please." It sounded as though someone was threatening him. Harry moved closer. All right, he heard Quirrell sob. Next second, Quirrell came hurrying out of the classroom, straightening his turban. He was pale and looked as though he was about to cry. He strode out of sight. Harry didn't think Quirrell had even noticed him. He waited until Quirrell's footsteps had disappeared, then peered into the classroom. It was empty, but a door stood ajar at the other end. Harry was halfway toward it before he remembered what he had promised himself about not meddling. All the same, he had have gambled 12 Sorcerer's stone that Snape had just left the room. And from what Harry had just heard, Snape would be walking with a new spring in his step. Quirrell seemed to have given in at last. Harry went back to the library where Hermione was testing Ron on astronomy. Harry told them what he had heard. "Snape's done it then," said Ron. If Quirrell told him how to break his anti-dark force spell, there is still Fluffy though, said Hermione. Maybe Snape's found out how to get past him without asking Hagrid, said Ron, looking up at the thousands of books surrounding them. I bet there is a book somewhere in here telling you how to get past a giant three-headed dog. So, what do we do, Harry? The light of adventure was kindling again in Ron's eyes, but Hermione's answered before Harry could. Go to Dumbledore. That's what we should have done ages ago. If we try anything ourselves, we will be thrown out for sure. But we have got no proof, said Harry. Quirrell's too scared to back us up. Snape's only got to say he doesn't know how the troll got in at Halloween and that he was nowhere near the third floor. Who do you think they will believe, him or us? It's not exactly a secret we hate him. Dumbledore will think we made it up to get him sacked. Filch wouldn't help us if his life depended on it. He is too friendly with Snape, and the more students get thrown out, the better, he will think. And don't forget, we are not supposed to know about the stone or Fluffy. That will take a lot of explaining. Hermione looked convinced, but Ron didn't. If we just do a bit of poking around? No, said Harry flatly. We have done enough poking around. He pulled a map of Jupiter toward him and started to learn the names of its moons. The following morning, notes were delivered to Harry, Hermione, and Neville at the breakfast table. They were all the same. Your detention will take place at 11 o'clock tonight. Meet Mr. Filch in the entrance hall. Professor Mcgonagall, Harry had forgotten they still had detentions to do in the furor over the points they had lost. He half expected Hermione to complain that this was a whole night of studying lost. But she didn't say a word. Like Harry, she felt they deserved what they had got. At 11 o'clock that night, they said goodbye to Ron in the common room and went down to the entrance hall with Neville. Filch was already there, and so was Malfoy. Harry had also forgotten that Malfoy had gotten a detention too. Follow me, said Filch, lighting a lamp and leading them outside. I bet you will think twice about breaking a school rule again, won't you? He said, leering at them. Oh yes, hard work and pain are the best teachers if you ask me. It's just a pity they let the old punishments die out. Hang you by your wrist from the ceiling for a few days. I have got the chains still in my office. Keep them well oiled in case they are ever needed. Right, off we go, and don't think of running off. Now, it will be worse for you if you do. They marched off across the dark grounds. Neville kept sniffing. Harry wondered what their punishment was going to be. It must be something really horrible, or Filch wouldn't be sounding so delighted. The moon was bright, but clouds scudding across it kept throwing them into darkness. Ahead, Harry could see the lighted windows of Hagrid's hut. Then they heard a distant shout. Is that you, Filch? Hurry up. I want to get started. Harry's heart rose. If they were going to be working with Hagrid, it wouldn't be so bad. His relief must have showed in his face, because Filch said, I suppose you think you will be enjoying yourself with that loaf. Well, think again, boy. It's into the forest you're going, and I am much mistaken if you will all come out in one piece. At this, Neville let out a little moan and Malfoy stopped dead in his tracks. The forest? He repeated, and it didn't sound quite as cool as usual. We can't go in there at night. There is all sorts of things in there. Were wolves, I heard. Neville clutched the sleeve of Harry's robe and made a choking noise. That's your problem, isn't it? Said Filch, his voice cracking with glee. Should have thought of them. Were wolves before you got in trouble, shouldn't you? Hagrid came striding toward them out of the dark, Fang at his heel. He was carrying his large crossbow and a quiver of arrows hung over his shoulder. About time, he said. I have been waiting here for half an hour already. All right, Harry, Hermione. I shouldn't be too friendly to them, Hagrid said. Filch coldly. They are here to be punished after all. That's why you're late, is it? Said Hagrid, frowning at Filch. Bit lecturing them. It's not your place there to that. You have done your bit. I will take over from here. I will be back at dawn, said Filch, for what's left of them. He added nastily, and he turned and started back towards the castle, his lamp bobbing away in the darkness. Malfoy now turned to Hagrid. I'm not going in that forest, he said, and Harry was pleased to hear the note of panic in his voice. You are if you want to stay at Hogwarts, said Hagrid fiercely. You have done wrong, and now you have got to pay for it. But this is servant stuff. It's not for students to do. I thought we would be copying lines or something. If my father knew I was doing this, he would tell you that's how it is at Hogwarts. Hagrid growled. Copying lines. What good's that to anyone? You will do somewhat useful or you will get out. If you think your father rather you were expelled, then get back off to the castle and pack. Go on. Malfoy didn't move. He looked at Hagrid furiously, but then dropped his gaze. Right then, said Hagrid, now listen carefully. Because it's dangerous what we are gonna do tonight, and I don't want no one taking risk. Follow me over here a moment. He led them to the very edge of the forest, holding his lamp up high. He pointed down a narrow, winding earth track that disappeared into the thick black trees. A light breeze lifted their hair as they looked into the forest. Look there, said Hagrid. See that stuff shining on the ground? Silvery stuff. That's unicorn blood. There is a unicorn in there with hurt badly by somewhat. This is the second time in a week. I found one dead last Wednesday. We are gonna try and find the poor thing. We might have to put it out of its misery. And what if whatever hurt the unicorn finds us first? Said Malfoy, unable to keep the fear out of his voice. There is nothing that lives in the forest that will hurt you if you with me or Fang, said Hagrid. And keep the path right. Now we are gonna split into two parties and follow the trail in different directions. There is blood all over the place. It must have been staggering around since last night at least. I want Fang, said Malfoy quickly, looking at Fang's long teeth. All right, but I warn you, he is a coward, said Hagrid. So me, Harry and Hermione will go one way and Draco, Neville and Fang will go the other. Now, if any of us finds the unicorn, we will send up green sparks, right? Get your wands out and practice now. That's it. And if anyone gets in trouble, send up red sparks and we will all come and find you. So, be careful, let's go. The forest was black and silent. A little way into it, they reached a fork in the earth path, and Harry, Hermione, and Hagrid took the left path while Malfoy, Neville, and Fang took the right. They walked in silence, their eyes on the ground. Every now and then, a ray of moonlight through the branches above lit a spot of silver blue blood on the fallen leaves. Harry saw that Hagrid looked very worried. Could a werewolf be killing the unicorns? Harry asked. Not fast enough, said Hagrid. It's not easy to catch a unicorn. They're powerful magic creatures. I never knew one to be hurt before. They walked past a mossy tree stump. Harry could hear running water. There must be a stream somewhere close by. There were still spots of unicorn blood here and there along the winding path. You all right, Hermione? Hagrid whispered. Don't worry, it can't have gone far. If it's this badly hurt, and then we will be able to get behind the tree. Hagrid seized Harry and Hermione and hoisted them off the path behind a towering oak. He pulled out an arrow and fitted it into his crossbow, raising it, ready to fire. The three of them listened. Something was slithering over dead leaves nearby. It sounded like a cloak trailing along the ground. Hagrid was squinting up the dark path, but after a few seconds, the sound faded away. I knew it, he murmured. There is somewhat in here. That should have been a werewolf, Harry suggested. That wasn't. No, werewolf, and it wasn't. No unicorn, neither, said Hagrid grimly. Right, follow me, but careful now. They walked more slowly, ears straining for the faintest sound. Suddenly, in a clearing ahead, something definitely moved. Who's there? Hagrid called. Show yourself. I am armed. And into the clearing came, was it a man or a horse? To the waist, a man with red hair and beard, but below that was a horse gleaming chestnut body with a long reddish tail. Harry and Hermione's jaws dropped. Oh, it's you, Ronan, said Hagrid in relief. How are you? He walked forward and shook the centaur's hand. Good evening to you, Hagrid, said Ronan. He had a deep, sorrowful voice. Were you going to shoot me? Can't be too careful, Ronan, said Hagrid, patting his crossbow. There is somewhat bad loose in his forest. This is Harry Potter and Hermoinegranger, by the way, students up at the school. And this is Ronan, you two. He is a centaur. We had noticed, said Hermione faintly. Good evening, said Ronan. Students are you? And do you learn much up at the school? A bit, said Hermione timidly. A bit? Well, that's something, Ronan sighed. He flung back his head and stared at the sky. Mars is bright tonight. Yeah, said Hagrid, glancing up too. Listen, I am glad we have run into you, Ronan, because there is a unicorn bit hurt. You have seen anything? Ronan didn't answer immediately. He stared unblinkingly upward, then sighed again. Always the innocent are the first victims, he said. So it has been for ages past, so it is now. Yeah, said Hagrid. But have you seen anything, Ronan? Anything unusual? Mars is bright tonight, Ronan repeated, while Hagrid watched him impatiently. Unusually bright, yeah, but I was meaning anything unusual a bit nearer home, said Hagrid. So you haven't noticed anything strange? Yet again Ronan took a while to answer. At last he said, The forest hides many secrets. A movement in the trees behind Ronan made Hagrid raise his bow again. But it was only a second centaur, black-haired and bodied and wilder looking than Ronan. Hullo, Bane, said Hagrid. All right. Good evening, Hagrid. I hope you are well. Well enough. Look, I have just been asking Ronan. You see anything odd in here lately? There is a unicorn bit injured. Could you know anything about it? Bane walked over to stand next to Ronan. He looked skyward. Mars is bright tonight, he said simply. We have heard, said Hagrid grumpily. Well, if either of you do see anything, let me know, won't you? We will be off then.